Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We'll be starting in 1 minute. We are just experiencing a few technical difficulties. So after those are worked out, we'll proceed with the Built Heritage Committee meeting for this morning. So good morning, everybody. Our technical difficulties have been resolved, so I'll just give it a minute for everybody to quiet down, and then we will start our proceedings this morning. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Built Heritage Committee meeting of October 8th, 2024. I'd like to call the members to order. This hybrid meeting is being facilitated through Zoom and is being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the original custodians of the unceded land in which the city of Ottawa is located. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Since this committee meeting is being streamed live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel, I'd like to remind participants to keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. For those participating here in the committee room, please use the microphone in front of you and keep your computer muted. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raised their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed to register to speak and provide written submissions to this committee, residents can still make written submissions to council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. I have received regrets from members Madigan and Councillor Kelly. I'm going to open this meeting with a statement due to the statutory nature of some of the items that we'll be dealing with. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed Heritage Conservation District plans for the Byward Market HCD and the Lower Town West HCD listed as item 5.5 on today's agenda under the Ontario Heritage Act. Only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. To submit written comments on the matter prior to their consideration by City Council on October 16, 2024, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask the committee coordinator to undertake a roll call of all members.
Councillor Kelly, Member Dote.
Here.
Member Quinn.
Present.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Member Madigan, Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Member Legault.
Here.
Vice Chair Plount.
Receipt.
Chair King.
Here.
We have quorum, Chair.
Thank you so much. Declarations of interest. Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. Are the minutes noted on the agenda confirmed? Thank you so much. Our first item is a referral, the designation of the Église Évangélique Baptiste at 284 King Edward Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is a motion to defer, so I will ask Vice Chair Plount to move that motion. Just for the edification of the committee, there is no presentation. So the file stands before us, and there is only correspondence from Heritage Ottawa, and Heritage Ottawa is here to speak only if required. But I will ask the Vice Chair to move the motion to defer.
Merci beaucoup. Whereas the owner has requested additional time to provide information for staff's consideration regarding potential adaptive reuse of the church property and/or development scenarios that involve the consolidation of the church property with abutting lands. And whereas this new information will require additional time for staff to review, seek clarification, and review with the owners on the development scenarios so that staff can be comfortable with any development concept, preserves the heritage of the church while allowing for the redevelopment of the site and abutting lands. Whereas the report has been referred from council back to Built Heritage Committee once previously, Therefore, be it resolved that Built Heritage Committee approve the following. 1, defer report 0010 for further consideration and return to Built Heritage by the end of Q1 2025, and permit staff to include, if necessary, a revised staff report and or supporting documentation for inclusion in the distribution of the meeting agenda with appropriate notice being provided. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. We do have delegations potentially with Heritage Ottawa. Just wanted to know if Heritage Ottawa wanted to speak on this item. Yeah, we're after. Okay, thank you. And I see that Councillor Leeper has raised his hand.
Thank you. Just, I don't want to perpetuate an impasse. Can I just get some comfort from staff that discussions are productive?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, staff have been working with the owner and their team on negotiations about this designation, and we're willing to, based on the meetings that we've had to date, have one more go at trying to come to an agreeable solution for everybody.
And the timeline into Q1 2025 obviously seems generous, so that leaves you
Yes,
with
and
enough
we,
time.
yeah, we wanted to allow for enough time and not, you know, have it be November and then be back here in November with another deferral motion, so.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to also thank staff for the hard work. I know that they are going back and forth with the owner, with their development team, with Vice Chair Plante, who's the ward councillor, and my office has also been informed, and there has been active meetings. So I think that there's progress there. So really thank you for that work. Is this motion to defer carried? Carried. Thank you so much. The next item is 5.1, consideration of application to repeal bylaw designated 501 Cole Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We will hold that item for a presentation and for registered speakers. The next item is 5.2, application for new construction at 160 Clement Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We will also hold that item for presentation, and we have registered speakers. The next item is designation of 178 Cambridge Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There's a presentation only if required. There is the requirement for a technical amendment. And we only have one potential registered speaker from Heritage Ottawa, as well as correspondence. Would you like to?
I would like a presentation.
Okay,
That's
okay, that's fine. So we
We'll
will
just have to go on.
we will hold that item for presentation. Item number 5.4 is designation of the Campanelli campus on Heron Road under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I see that Councillor Carr is here. I would assume that you would want a presentation on this item.
Yes, please.
Okay. So we will hold that item. And the next item is the adoption of the new Heritage Conservation District plans for the Byward and Lower Town West HCDs. We should hold that item for a presentation just due to the complexity of what's being considered before us. And that's will be our substantive agenda. So we will return back to item 5.1, consideration of application to repeal bylaw designated 501 Cole Avenue for presentation.
Okay, good morning, Chair King and members of Built Heritage Committee. So this morning I'll be presenting on the application to repeal the designation of 501 Cole Avenue, which is a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So I'm going to provide a bit of background on this property and its history, and then discuss the actual application. And so next slide, please. So 51 Cole is located in Ward 15 in the Highland Park neighborhood near the intersection of Cole Avenue and Kenwood Avenue, and it's approximately 350 meters south of Richmond Road. It's designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act as an individually designated property, subject to bylaw 2022-348. On site is a 2-story red brick house pictured on the screen. And next slide, please. So I'll just quickly summarize the character-related history for this property, starting with the designation. So this info is for the benefit of the committee, but it's important to note that today we're looking at the repeal application at hand. We're not starting from scratch and reconsidering the designation of. So an initial request to designate the subject property came in from the Westboro Community Association in 2021. In May of 2022, staff received a 60-day notice of the owner's intent to demolish the building on site, submitted in conjunction with a severance application. At the time, the property was listed as a non-designated property on the city's heritage register. At the ward councilor's request, staff prepared a report on the designation of 51 Cole for committee and council's consideration, following the heritage register procedures that were in place at the time. So this report went to the former Built Heritage Subcommittee in June of 2022. So staff's assessment of the property at the time found that it met one of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. So at this time, this met the minimum threshold for designation under Ontario Regulation 906. Staff's report ultimately recommended against council designating this property. The Built Heritage Subcommittee moved to recommend designation of this property, and council carried this recommendation, issuing a notice of intention to designate the property on July 9th, 2022. Following receipt of the notice of intention to designate, the property owner submitted an objection to the notice, which directed the item back to Built Heritage Subcommittee and council for a second consideration. Committee and council upheld council's original decision in October of 2022, and the designation bylaw was passed by council on October 5th, 2022. And next slide, please. So following passage of the bylaw, the property owner appealed council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. An OLT hearing was held on June 6th and 7th of 2023, and a decision was issued by the OLT on February 20th, 2024. That found that the property met one of the 9 designation criteria under Ontario Regulation 906, and therefore the OLT upheld the designation of 51 Cole under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, subject to amendments to the designation bylaw. Following some discussions between representatives of the property owner and the city, an amending bylaw was passed on July 10th, 2024 to implement the OLT decision. And that brings us to today, where the Built Heritage Committee is considering the repeal application. And next slide, please. So how do these repeal applications work? It's a bit of an uncommon application type. However, under Section 32 of the Ontario Heritage Act, owners of properties designated under Part 4 can apply to council to repeal a bylaw that designates their property. So the process for dealing with a repeal application functions a little bit like a backwards designation. Built Heritage Committee and council's job is to consider whether an already designated property should continue to be designated. So when a repeal application is received, the city is required to post notice of the application. After this notice is posted, members of the public can submit objections to the application. Essentially, they can submit submissions that express an objection to that repeal application and support maintaining the designation within 30 days of that notice being posted. Council must make a decision on the matter within 90 days after the conclusion of that 30-day objection period. And the decision can either be to consent to the repeal, so pass a repealing bylaw and de-designate the property, or to refuse the appeal where the property remains designated. So just to further clarify, if the committee wishes to see the property continue to be designated, it would vote to refuse this application to repeal the designation. And if it wants the property if it wants to see the property not be designated or not continue to be designated, it should vote to consent to that application to repeal the designation. Both of these potential decisions can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And next slide, please. So let's just quickly look at the basic details for this repeal application. So notice of the application was posted online on July 24th, 2024. The 30-day period to submit objections concluded on August 23rd, 2024. Council has until November 22nd, 2024 to make a decision on the matter. And next slide, please. So now we'll look at the actual sort of substantive argument submitted with the repeal application. So the applicant's legal counsel provided a letter detailing 3 grounds for the repeal of the designation bylaw. I'll present each and provide a summary of staff's response. So the first argument submitted was that designation now requires 2 criteria rather than 1. So as the committee is familiar with, Ontario Regulation 906 establishes 9 criteria that are considered when assessing a property for designation. As part of changes implemented by Bill 23, after January 1st, 2023, Regulation 906 requires that a property meets 2 of the 9 designation criteria. At the time the 501 Cole was considered for designation by council, prior to Bill 23's amendments being in place, Regulation 906 required a property to meet only 1 of these criteria. The applicant argues that since the property has been assessed to meet 1 of the 9 criteria for designation, it therefore does not meet the current threshold for designation, which requires 2. Staff do not agree with this argument. The current version of Regulation 906 includes a transition clause under Section 2.2, which states essentially that the previous version of Regulation 906, so the former test where only 1 criteria was required, continues to apply if a notice of intent to designate a property was issued after January 24th, 2006 and before January 1st, 2023. So in this specific case, the notice of intention to designate for this property was issued in 2022, so within that date range. Therefore, it's staff's opinion that the previous test under Regulation 906 continues to apply and that the property meets this threshold for designation. Next slide, please. Clearly states that the where a property is under the park. The criteria were considered on this property in the recent OLT decision on the designation of the subject property, a hearing which did occur after Bill 23 was in place, and that determined that the property did meet 1 of the designation criteria. So as such, the property continues to meet the current requirements of Regulation 906, subject to the transition clause in Section 2.2. And next slide, please. So the applicant's third argument is that consideration of the repeal application must only consider the criterion listed in the designation bylaw. Essentially, that staff can't put forward any additional criteria and that the property and can't put forward any additional criteria to argue that the property satisfies Regulation 906. So given staff's position regarding the transition clause in Section 2.2 of Regulation 906, no additional criteria need to be met for this property to be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Therefore, staff are not presenting any additional criteria beyond those listed in the designation bylaw for review from this report. And next slide, please. The Part 4 designation of the property. And several objections also expressed concern as to why the city was considering an application to repeal a designation bylaw. For clarity, the repeal process is enabled by Section 32 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and the ability to apply for a repeal is the right of owners of properties designated under Part 4. So the city is required to follow the process outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act and consider these applications whenever they're received. And next slide, please. So just to conclude, given the recommendations outlined in this presentation, staff are recommending that the application to repeal the designation bylaw be refused and that the designation be upheld. Staff are of the opinion that the arguments submitted are not sufficient to determine that 501 Cole fails to meet the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act or Ontario Regulation 906. So in terms of potential next steps, should council refuse this application, the owner of the property may appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And should council consent to this application and pass a repealing bylaw, any member of the public can appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We're just being notified by members of committee that Greg, your microphone had been cutting out. So I don't know if we might want to use a different microphone for future comments or questions, but I just wanted to bring that to both your attention and the attention of staff, technical staff members in the room. We did receive correspondence on this item, 2 letters in support of designation, as well as correspondence from Heritage Ottawa. And we have a number 3 registered speakers, and the first registered speaker is from Heritage Ottawa. Thank you so much for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Heritage Ottawa was pleased to support the designation of this property when the Built Heritage Committee disagreed with the staff report and recommended that it be designated. We were likewise pleased when council supported the BHC recommendation. The fact that the owner's challenge to the recommended designation at the Ontario Land Tribunal was not upheld, and given the widespread community support for its designation, we see no reason to support any application to repeal the designation. We heartily support this designation and hope that will be followed by many more in this area of the city. We also congratulate the city for not backing down on its designation in light of the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your delegation. The next registered speaker is Heather Mitchell of the Westboro Community Association.
Hello. Thank you so much for letting us participate today. As you can see, we had 79 neighbors come out in support of what Greg has just told you. We do not want to see the designation repealed. Please uphold the bylaw. You passed this designation. The city passed it, the larger council passed it, planning committee passed it, OLT passed it. Our colleagues at Heritage Canada agrees with it. Please uphold the designation and disregard this request for a repeal. That's really all we have to say. And I want to thank everybody for their work, especially our councillor who in the very beginning saw this opportunity. Westboro does not have a lot of designations. Please support our efforts to preserve our heritage. That's really all I need to say. I really am depending on you to continue to uphold this designation. Thank you.
Chair, you're muted.
Chair King, your microphone shows as being muted.
Working through difficulties. Stop. Here on Zoom. Yeah, we're aware that people on the Zoom connection to us. We'll take a brief step to
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
So staff has been working on the issue and they're saying that it appears to be working. I'm just looking at the virtual room, and if you can hear me, it'd be great if you could wave. Excellent. Okay, wonderful. So we've worked through some of the technical difficulties. We'll resume in a minute. So thank you so much for your patience and your perseverance. And just, we've worked through the technical difficulties, so we'll be starting.
We have a door that goes somewhere.
So we'll, since we didn't really start with proceedings, we'll just continue with this recess until the technical issues are resolved.
Vice Chair Plant, are you able to hear us over Zoom? Can we hear you?
I can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Okay, so I believe that we might have fixed the issue, so we can continue to resume with the meeting. Once again, apologies. Our next registered speaker is Michael Polwin on behalf of the applicant.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and thank you. This is, if it ends up at the tribunal, going to be a legal argument. And with the greatest of respect to Mr. McPherson, his reading of the act and regulations is incorrect. What he has provided to you is section 2.2 of the regulation, which is not quite a transitional provision, although he called it that. What it said, 2.2, section 1, as it read immediately before January 1, 2023, continues to apply in respect of a property for which a notice of intention to designate was given under subsection 29, 1.1 of the Act after January 24, 2006, and before January 1, 2003. I note specifically it does not refer at all to a property which has been designated. I also note specifically that it does not refer to a request for repeal. In fact, the entirety of section 2 of the regs speaks to notices of designation. And in fact, sub 3 is quite it illustrates the issue. In respect of a property for which a notice of intention to designate is given under subsection 29 1.1 of the Act on or after January 1, 2023, the property may be designated under section 29 if it meets 2 or more of the criteria, etc. At the end of the day, the section relied upon by staff is what we call in our trade cherry picking. When you look at it in its entirety, we are absolutely satisfied that combined with the case law that says that that a repeal must be considered based on the criteria in place at the time, it is obvious that the tribunal will look at it and say, it's no longer 1, it's 2, and we are going to repeal it. I want to go back in time to the initial designation. Staff recommended against it. And they said they could live with perhaps 1. In fact, what this committee and council did was to base it on 3 criteria, and the tribunal threw out those other 2. There was never a professional report to this committee or to council recommending designation at the time. And in fact, we called under subpoena Leslie Collins as a witness on our behalf. I think it's important that we not continue to go around in circles on this. We are asking that council or that committee and council, in fact, repeal the designation because it no longer meets the law. We think it never did, but leaving that aside, it certainly does not meet the law anymore. And we will be, if we go to the tribunal, calling Ms. Collins again. This is going to end up in a legal fight. We're satisfied on our reading that based on the law, we will win. This is not a political matter. It's not based on 79 letters or indicators of support. This is a question of how does the law apply to this property? And staff, with respect, have got it wrong. And we would ask that this committee supports repeal.
Thank you, Mr. Polwin, for your comments. Are there any questions for Mr. Polwin? Seeing none, thank you so much for your delegation. Questions to staff? Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. So just to clarify, because I am a new councillor, it's been 2 years. So when this originally came to the Build Heritage Subcommittee, at the time staff was not recommending designation, and then the committee decided to recommend it?
That's correct.
Okay. And so now, has your opinion changed?
So through the chair, at the time of the initial consideration of designation, we assessed the property and found that it met one of the designation criteria under Regulation 906, which at the time was the test for designation. So property only needed to meet one. Our recommendation at the time was that while it met one and council was able to designate under the Ontario Heritage Act, we didn't recommend doing so. Our assessment of the property in that it meets one criteria hasn't changed.
Okay. So the contention in the repeal letter is that the province has raised the threshold since the passage of the original motion. Could you just clarify the transition provisions that are in the Ontario Heritage Act?
I'll refer that one to Ms. Enta, who is on the call.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. So Mr. McPherson's assessment of the transition provisions was accurate. Staff did consult with legal services. The regulation is very clear on 2 counts. One, a property that has been given a notice of designation. And then the second one that Mr. Polwin referred to is number 3, in respect of a property for which a notice of intention to designate is given under subsection 29 1.1 of the Act on or after January 1st, 2023, the property may be designated under section 29. So it simply accounts for a notice of intention to designate that's been given. It, in my view, assumes that that property can then continue to be designated after the change. In this case, the property was designated before the change. We feel that staff have correctly interpreted the legislation and provided an accurate interpretation to you as to how this property should be considered today in light of this application.
Thank you. So another question for staff. If this bylaw is not repealed today, does the property owner have other avenues to seek to limit or eliminate the designation?
Through the chair, so the applicant is eligible to appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. They're also eligible to apply again to repeal this bylaw after a period of 12 months has passed.
Okay. But we've been provided with no new information that would substantially change your opinion, or you think council's opinion?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate the property owner's contention that the threshold for designation hasn't been met, but council and the Ontario Land Tribunal have already disagreed on this point. You know, the owner not wanting it to be designated and having the funds to pursue lengthy and costly legal process is something that we're seeing more and more. Just because someone has the resources to keep challenging the bylaw because things have gone away they don't like doesn't mean council is obliged to cave on what I think is a pretty simple policy matter. So I'll be supporting the recommendation to maintain the designation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Troster. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if it's so much a question for staff as just information for the other members of the committee. This was appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. To staff, when council determined to designate this property, did you oppose it? Did you feel that council was wrong in assessing that it had the contextual value?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, staff did not oppose it. The staff recommendation was that it met one of the criteria under the Act, and therefore council was within its rights under the Heritage Act to designate the property.
Thank you. For my fellow committee members, I pulled up paragraph 9 of the Ontario Land Tribunal's decision, which states that much was made by counsel for both parties about the fact that city staff disagreed with the designation. It should be noted that it is city council that makes the determination of cultural heritage value or interest, and designation under the Ontario Heritage Act and not staff. While it behooves a municipal council to consider the reports of staff, it is under the Ontario Heritage Act the responsibility of the council to make that decision, and they are certainly not bound by such reports. I don't think that that is a belligerent thing to say. I don't think it diminishes the role of our professional staff in providing us with their best advice, but I would urge councillors to recognize the role that they have as the final authority over whether or not designation bylaws get passed. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Leeper. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'd just like to say on the record, I agree with Councillor Leeper's assessment. I think that that's just a factual assertion of council's responsibilities. So is the report carried?
Carried.
Thank you so much. Carried. This report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on October 16th for consideration. The next item is application for new construction at 160 Clemo Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Will receive a presentation from staff.
Okay, good morning. This one will be a little bit more straightforward. So I'm presenting on the application for new construction at 160 Clemo Avenue, which is a property located in the Clemo-Unclin Driveway and Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District. So next slide, please. So just for context, the subject property is located on the south side of Clemo Avenue near the intersection with Bank Street in the Glebe. Specifically, just for reference, the building is directly west of the Kunstad Sports Building on Bank Street. On the site currently is a 2-story red brick house identified as a contributing property in the HCD. And next slide, please. So the subject proposal is to construct a new 2-story single attached house on a portion of the existing property. So the existing house will be retained, but the existing attached garage, sort of vestibule addition to the east of the existing house will be removed. A new shared driveway between the two houses will be established along with new landscape front lawns, replacing the existing extra wide driveway. So applications to the Committee of Adjustment for consent to sever and minor variances are also required to implement this proposal in addition to the heritage permit, and the applicant will be applying for those within the year. And next slide, please. So just to quickly highlight what's being removed on the site here. So notably the carport addition on the east of the existing building. So highlighted in red attached to that existing building outline, in addition to 2 sheds on the property. And next slide. So this slide shows the proposed house in relation to the existing house. So the proposed house is clad in red brick on 3 facades with the rear facade clad in a cement fiber paneling. And the height of the foundation and entrance, the window pattern, and the roof pattern have all been designed to be compatible with the surrounding HCD and draw from elements of the adjacent buildings. And next slide, please. So this slide just quickly shows the east and west facades. So those are also clad in red brick. And next slide. And then additionally here is a rendering of the proposed building. And next slide, please. And then this slide highlights the adjacent property. So that kind of gives an outline of the rough zoning permissions on the Kunstad Sports Building, and then the proposal in relation to both that and the existing building on site. And next slide, please. And then just to quickly highlight here, so on the right is an image of the kind of current site situation. And on the left is the proposed sort of landscaping plan. And you'll notice that there's a significant increase to the impermeable cover and front yard landscaping on the site. So we see it as a significant improvement in terms of meeting some of the goals of the Heritage Conservation District in terms of having green front lawns throughout the HCD. And next slide, please. So we are recommending approval of this with 3 conditions. So just providing a copy of the building permit plans upon submission of building permit application, just so we're all up to date on any changes that might be required. Providing samples of the exterior brick cladding and window details just to ensure that everything meets the HCD guidelines. And then finally, just providing updated municipal addressing. So there is a severance here. So just making sure that all the permits and everything will match up going forward as the applicant progresses. And next slide, please. And then in terms of consultation, so Heritage Ottawa and the Glebe Community Association were notified of the application for new construction. Council Menard as well was notified of this application, in addition to neighbors within 30 meters of the property. And then as noted before, the proposal is also subject to approvals at the Committee of Adjustment, which will involve a hearing at the Committee of Adjustment. And next slide, please. So then finally, just in terms of recommendations, so we're recommending approval of this application for new construction. And then standard conditions of delegating authority for minor changes to staff and approving issuance of that permit within 2 years. And thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa. We also do have the applicant team in attendance. I didn't know if they wanted to provide a presentation or whether they just wanted to make themselves available for questions of the committee. So are there any questions of the applicant team? Yes. Seeing none, thank you so much. The next registered speaker is William Price from the Glebe Community Association. Thank you so much for joining us, and you just need to press the button and you'll have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm William Price, Chair of the Glebe Community Association Heritage Committee, and I wish to speak in support of the application for heritage permit for the proposed development at 160 Clemau. I wish to express my appreciation for having been invited earlier this year by the owners and applicants and the responsible heritage planner to participate in pre-consultations on this proposed infill at 160 Clemau. These consultations led to acceptance by the applicants of numerous positive suggestions from the planner for changes in the draft design that have enhanced its ability to be perceived as consistent with the HCD plan and other heritage requirements, and as being an excellent example of an infill that strives to be heritage appropriate and a pleasing addition to the immediate heritage streetscape and to that of the overall HCD. At the same time, the owner's architect achieved a design that satisfied the family's residential and investment goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your intervention. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. And we're always appreciative of the work that community associations do in terms of heritage committees. We do have one more delegation that's registered if required, Heritage Ottawa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will again be very brief. Heritage Ottawa is pleased to support this application for new construction and intensification in the Clemau East Estate Heritage Conservation District. The property owner, in close collaboration with city staff and members of the Glebe Community Association's Heritage Committee, has developed a proposal that is compliant and consistent with the policies and guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District as outlined in the staff report. It is a model for how a property owner can work with the community in developing an application that benefits not only the owner, but the community at large. We support the position of the GCA and congratulate all involved in the negotiations that have led to this result. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Questions to staff? Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much to the Glebe Community Association, to Heritage Ottawa, and to staff for working with the applicant to improve the overall design. It's good to see. I just wanted to make sure that I know we had a few conditions that were listed there. One of the important pieces to neighbors in this area is the historic blue spruce in the front eastern yard. I understand that's going to be retained. Is there something in conditions that we need to add to make sure that that occurs? I saw I think it was 3 conditions you had set out there. Is that another condition that will be part of the final reconstruction?
Through the chair, so colleagues in forestry were involved in early pre-consult discussions with the applicant. So the applicant is aware of the retention of that tree and requirements from the city. Since this is going through the committee of adjustment process as well, I believe conditions related to the retention of those trees may be implemented at that stage.
Okay. I'll just encourage it for the next case. The front yard will be configured to remove most of the hardscape and the driveway and replaced by landscaping, which is good to see as well. I'm wondering about the single shared driveway to the rear of the property. I understand that's going to be added with garages and parking at the back of the properties. So there's no new curb cut required. I understand there's no impact on the boulevard on the frontage. Is that correct?
I would have to confirm specifically if there isn't a curb cut required, but if there is, they would have to receive a private approach or permit as well as part of that process.
Okay. Lastly, Chair, I just wanted to say again, thank you for the advance notice and the process on this one. I think it was handled really well by staff, and appreciate that we're in a position to approve this today, and thanks to the applicant for working with staff and the community.
Thank you so much. Member Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I start, I just wanted to note that Councillor Menard did start to fade away there. So if we could ask the people that are present, if you could really put the mic when you're speaking closer to your faces, I don't know, it might help. Anyhow, yeah, just to say, I just wanted to comment to say that I'm going to be supporting the designation and to congratulate all parties involved, the owner applicant and staff and Glebe Community Association. I think this is a very nice example of an infill project inside a Part 5 Heritage Conservation District that is compatible, subordinate, and distinguishable from its surroundings, while nonetheless maintaining a traditional design approach, which is something quite different from what we often see, which is a very modern addition, which I'm not saying isn't a good thing, but there has been a tendency to almost suggest that you cannot have a more traditional approach when you do these things. So I think this is a really nice example of where that is successful. So yes, I will be supporting the designation. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much for your comments. I don't see any other hands raised. So is the report carried? Carried. This report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on October 16th for consideration. Our next item is the designation of 178 Cambridge Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And there is a technical amendment that will be moved by Vice Chair Plante.
Merci. Whereas document 6, the statement of cultural heritage value in the report for designation of 178 Cambridge Street North includes reference to a wood building attached at the rear of the property as a contributing factor in the designation of this property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And where our staff have revised document 5 and request that it be replaced with the currently published version to remove reference to this wood building, as well as make minor changes to the neighborhood name, construction date, and extent of fire in 1900 100, and whereas the more contemporary structure on the property has many key exterior attributes that contribute to the heritage value, making the property an ideal candidate for designation. Therefore, be it resolved that the current version of document 5 be removed and replaced with the amended version to accurately outline the statement of cultural heritage value at 178 Cambridge Street North. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair, for reading that in. And now to a presentation from staff.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. This presentation will cover staff's recommendation to designate 178 Cambridge Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. 178 Cambridge Street North, known as the Sycamore, is a detached 2.5-story Queen Anne Revival brick building. The property is located in the Dalhousie neighborhood in Ward 14 on the west side of Cambridge Street North between Somerset Street and Christie Street and Arthur Street to the west. The existing house is estimated to have been built between 1899 and 1901 by Herman Hayner, a contractor who built houses locally and was a founding member of the Carpenters Union. The existing house built by Hayner replaced an earlier modest wood house from the 1870s. The property is currently listed on the Heritage Register, and the owner submitted a request to designate on March 24th of this year. The property has cultural heritage value for its design and contextual values. It meets 4 of the 9 criteria for designation. Next slide, please. The property has design and physical value as a representative example of the Queen Anne Revival architectural style. Buildings in this style are asymmetrical, busy, and ornate with lots of complexity and detail. The Queen Anne Revival style is exemplified at the house at 178 Cambridge Street North by its multiple construction materials, irregular massing, turret, and decorative ornamentation. It also displays a high degree of craftsmanship, which is demonstrated by the turret, its carved wood front door, and carved wooden sycamore crest on the front facade from which the house gets its name. Next slide, please. The property has contextual value as it supports the mixed architectural character of the Dalhousie neighborhood and the surrounding areas west of Bronson Avenue, where there is a prevalence for Victorian and Edwardian houses built in various vernacular and revival styles, as shown in the top photo on the slide. The property is historically linked to the neighboring properties on Cambridge Street North through George Sherwood, a prominent judge and politician who was the first owner of the property parcel. Together, the properties on the street formed part of the former Sherwood estate in what is today the Dalhousie neighborhood and the surrounding areas south of LeBreton Flats. The location of the old Sherwood estate is shown circled in red on the map on the slide. Sherwood sold the property parcel for development in the 1870s, along with several other parcels on Cambridge Street North, and the original wood house was built on the lot around this time. And lastly, the property is linked to the growth of labor unions in Ottawa during the construction booms of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The property is connected to the establishment of the Carpenters Union through property owner Herman Hayner, who served as the union's first secretary and also initiated new members at his residence. In conclusion, staff are recommending designation as the property meets 4 of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act for its design and contextual values. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We did get correspondence from Heritage Ottawa, and Heritage Ottawa is also registered to speak. And we appreciate we have you getting your exercise in today. You have 5
And I'll be
minutes.
even briefer than I was the previous 2 times. Congratulations to Heritage Planning staff in this detailed and informative report and for recommending this property for designation. The current owner should also be congratulated for the attention paid to bringing the house back to its original configuration and for the care taken in preserving the distinctive characteristics of the property over the years. We agree with the staff assessment that the recommendation meets 4 of the 9 criteria under Ontario Regulation 0906 and that it should be recommended to council for designation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any questions for you, so thank you so much for the delegation. Questions to staff, Councillor Troster.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee's indulgence. I just think this is an incredibly fascinating house and I wanted to hear the presentation. Do we know why it's called the Sycamore? Is there any historical data?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay, it's very cool. And I just want to note that the owners of this house they requested designation and they're both incredibly active in the Dalhousie Community Association. So this designation is quite special. I'm just very excited to support this. And as we move forward, I'm really excited to have more discussions with staff about how we can preserve West Centertown's built heritage. So I'm very happy to support this designation. Thanks for your indulgence with the presentation. It is a very cool building. And there's also a very cool piece of public art that's right beside it on Cambridge Street. So take a look for it when you walk by.
Well, thank you so much for the question, the good question and the intervention. Councillor Troster, I agree with you that it's important for us to protect our built heritage cultural resources. And it's always wonderful to have presentations and that really not only demonstrates the beauty of the architecture that we have in the city, but also really demonstrates the good work of staff. So I really do appreciate those comments. Seeing no other questions, is the report carried? Carried. Thank you so much. This report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council. Oh, and the technical amendment motion as well, as amended. Carried. Thank you so much. The report as amended will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on October 16th for consideration. The next item is designation of the Campanile campus, 1485, 1495 Heron Road under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And we will have a presentation from staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I will be presenting this one this morning. For those of you who are at agenda review, this one has taken the cake as my longest file ever at the city. I've been working on this for 12 years, so it's a very exciting day to be bringing forward this designation of the Campanile campus at 1485, 1495 Heron Road. Next slide, please. The proposed designation is for, as I said, the former Campanile campus, also known as the Federal Study Center, as well as St. Patrick's Intermediate Catholic School. The properties are located on the north side of Heron Road, east of Bank Street. The main property at 1495 Heron Road comprises 11 of the 12 buildings that are proposed for designation. This property is owned by Canada Lands Corporation, and the parcel at 1485 Heron Road includes a number of buildings owned by the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Only the former St. Patrick's Intermediate School is proposed for inclusion in this designation. The campus was constructed between 1963 and 1966 as a religious educational campus, which included a convent, a novitiate, and a school, linked through cohesive architecture and landscape expression. The campus was converted to the Federal Study Center in 1974 and served as a training center for federal public servants until its closure in the early 2010s. The property meets 7 of the 9 criteria for designation under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. So the first recommendation of this report is that Built Heritage Committee recommend that Council issue a notice of intention to designate the properties at 1485 and 1495 Heron Road. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of the campus layout. So this plan shows the layout of the campus, and I've annotated it to indicate which buildings are proposed for inclusion in the designation. So building G, which is in gray at the bottom sort of center of the plan, is on the 1485 Heron Road parcel. It's the only building on that parcel of land that is proposed for designation. The other 2 buildings with the yellow X's are excluded. They are later buildings that were constructed as part of the original complex. 2 buildings on the 1495 parcel with the turquoise X's, H and I, are part of the original campus construction, but they are not recommended for retention as part of this project due to their condition. but they do form part of the original campus and part of that western courtyard, which I'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes. So I've highlighted them just to indicate that there are heritage attributes related to their location and footprint, but not to the buildings themselves. And then the other two buildings with the yellow X's on this plan in red are later additions to the campus that are recommended for exclusion from the designation in order to allow for new construction on the site. Next slide, please. So as I said, the campus was constructed between 1963 and 1966. It's a rare and representative example of a modernist educational campus in Ottawa. Modernism was popular in Canada from the 1940s until the 1970s and was a worldwide movement in architecture that reflected a break from the highly ornamented and decorative styles of the past. The style was widely employed across building typologies, but educational and religious campuses like Campanile provide examples of the master planning often associated with these large-scale projects. The campus reflects the modern style through its visual cohesiveness and architectural expression, including the wide use of flat roofs, rectilinear forms, rough red brick, smooth concrete, copper details, clear story windows, and limited ornamentation. The landscape elements are also integrated into the overall design of the campus, including 4 courtyards, with large limestone boulders, built-in benches and concrete planters, walkways, open lawns, trees, and shrubs. The concrete colonnaded entrance to the campus is highlighted by the namesake Campanile, which, if you don't know, means bell tower, which is the prominent concrete bell tower that you see on the site. The design value of this site also extends to the site design, which creates a carefully articulated functional arrangement. The design reflects the original function as a religious complex through its arrangement of buildings and contemplative spaces, such as the monastic and novitiate courtyards. The arrangement of the 12 buildings around a raised quadrangle highlights the importance of the chapel as a central feature of the campus. Next slide, please. Finally, for design and physical value, the campus displays a high degree of artistic merit through its use of a light well in the chapel to reflect light and water patterns onto the sculpture of Christ with manna from heaven. So its associative value, the Campanile campus is directly associated with the Sœurs de la Congrégation de Notre Dame. The Congregation of Notre Dame was North America's first women's religious community, established in Montreal, at that time Ville-Marie, in 1657. Teachers were sent to Bytown in 1868, and by the 1950s, the operations of the order in Ottawa had expanded significantly to a point where they needed a larger campus to replace their property on Gloucester Street. So they purchased this vacant piece of land from J.J. Heron in 1959. It was formerly a part of the Heron farm. And this was a partnership with the Roman Catholic School Board. And the scale of the project is symbolic of the growth of Roman Catholicism in Ottawa in the post-war period. The campus, which in 1974 became the Federal Study Center, also reflects sort of the explosive growth of the federal public service in the post-war period. A result of new facilities were required to train these public servants. In addition, the passage of the Official Languages Act in 1969 created a need for language training for public servants, across the country in both official languages. After the sisters closed the Campanile campus in 1973 due to financial struggles, it was purchased by the federal government and converted to a training facility. Public servants from across the country undertook training here from 1974 until the early 2010s. Next slide, please. And if the English could be advanced one more, please. Thank you. So the Campanile campus also yields information that contributes to an understanding of reform in the Catholic Church in the 1960s, resulting from the Second Vatican Council. The objective of the reforms was to modernize the way parishioners participated in Mass, and these were directly reflected in the modern design of the campus, especially through the chapel's simple decoration, open worship area, and emphasis of light on the altar, which were intended to participate more fully in Mass. Campanile also demonstrates the integrated work of the architecture firm Murray & Murray Architects and Town Planning Consultants in collaboration with Peter Coe, the landscape architect, and artist Gerald Trottier. The campus is an excellent example of Timothy Murray's modern institutional style and one of his earliest works, and to date his largest commission. Artist Gerald Trottier was an Ottawa artist friend and frequent collaborator with Murray. He was responsible for the interior of the chapel, including the integrated sculpture entitled Christ with Manna from Heaven that you can see in this historic photo and still remains in the chapel today. Next slide, please. Finally, the contextual value of this property. It is linked to its surroundings as a representation of Ottawa's dramatic suburban growth in the post-war period. It was, as I mentioned, farmland purchased from J.J. Heron on the outskirts of the city at the time, but it quickly became an area of significant suburban growth. It's important in maintaining the character of Alta Vista. Its modernist architectural expression is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And the construction of the Heron Gate neighborhood to the south occurred shortly after the construction of this campus, and its main road, Baycrest Drive, was aligned with the Campanile's entrance driveway, extending the significant axial views towards the bell tower and the chapel roof, as you can see in the photo on this slide. Next slide, please. Just going to go through a very quick few photos of some of the key heritage attributes that you've heard me speak about. So one of which is this axial view that you see in the large photo here, looking north from the entrance to the campus towards the chapel, highlighting the chapel as the most significant building on the site around which everything else is organized. You also can see in two of these photos the historic Campanile. Unfortunately, the bell is gone. When the sisters left the site in 1974, they took their bell with them, but the bell tower remains. Next slide, please. This just gives you a sense of some of those landscape elements that I spoke about. So you can see in the top left-hand corner here, the novitiate courtyard. These were meant to be contemplative spaces for young nuns who were being educated at the campus. You see on the far right, the sculpture I've spoken about, Christ with Manna from Heaven. The bottom right being the rough red brick that you see throughout the campus in all of the buildings. And then the two middle photos being some of the other sort of landscape elements of the design. Next slide, please. One of the interesting things about this project, and this forms recommendation 2 of this proposal, is its associated planning applications. And I do have Siobhan Kelly from Planning Services here with me today in case there are questions about that. So the property was added to the Canada Public was revised in summer of 2024 to allow for greater density on the site. The zoning proposal, which will be before Planning Committee on October 23rd, you see the site rezoned, to allow for greater density, allowing approximately 1,100 square residential units and 7,600 square meters of non-residential space, as well as the retention of most of the buildings on the site. This report has been proposed on a schedule to align with the zoning bylaw amendments so that council may consider both the designation and the zoning bylaw amendment at the same time at its meeting of October the 30th. Next slide, please. So in light of the zoning bylaw amendment, staff are recommending that council adopt another document that are called the Conservation Design Guidelines for 1495 Heron Road. And basically, in the absence of proposed designs related to the zoning bylaw amendment, but recognizing the goal of adding additional density to the site and potentially pursuing greater intervention and alteration to some of the buildings, staff recommended that CLC with their consultants prepare a document that could guide the vision for the site into the future. So since at this point, our understanding is that CLC will not be developing the site themselves, And in the absence of what this committee would normally see as detailed plans for the alteration of the heritage buildings, a document has been prepared sort of akin to, I would say, a Heritage Conservation District plan, but won't have the same standing as such. So given the campus nature of the site and the importance of its cohesive design and sense of place, this document is seen as a useful tool to ensure that that CLC, the city, and any future property owner would have a common understanding of the goals and values of this site. The document is intended to provide more context than is possible through a designation bylaw. And as I said, the document will not have statutory standing under the Heritage Act. Staff recommend that Built Heritage Committee recommend that council adopt the guidelines for use in evaluating future applications on this site. And then in addition, we have integrated with the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, a proposed holding provision in the zoning that would require a developer to address these guidelines through a heritage impact assessment at the time of development. Next slide, please. So just to quickly give you an overview of what these conservation design guidelines are, they include two different demonstration plans, one that's noted as a lower impact approach that you see on the left of this slide, and one that's called a higher impact approach on the right-hand side. The document does note that these are but two options and that there are likely a range of other development plans that would be appropriate for the site. But the lower impact approach is to proceed with the site's conservation with minimal intervention to the existing buildings and landscape features and adding new buildings adjacent to existing heritage buildings. This approach would have a lower physical impact and visual impact on the heritage resources on the site. The higher impact approach is included in the document to recognize that it may not be feasible to complete the lower impact approach depending on a variety of factors. The second approach would employ a larger amount of intervention to the existing contributing buildings while conserving the site's cultural heritage value. Next slide, please. And then this is the final piece I'll talk about for the design guidelines is the zones. So the conservation design guideline divides the campus into 4 zones as shown on this map. Zone A is seen as the area of highest sensitivity. The guidelines for this zone state that heritage buildings and landscape features should be retained and conserved, including the interior heritage attributes listed for the chapel. Interventions should be kept to a minimum. The intent of this zone is to maintain and highlight the central axis of the campus as a key public space and centerpiece of the new site design. The draft zoning schedule also reflects this as well, making this area a no-build zone. Zone B is intended to frame and define the edges of the campus core. Significant portions of the existing buildings are intended to be retained, and the document includes guidelines related to additions to existing buildings and new construction in the zone. These should be informed by the scale of the existing buildings, and additions should be no more than 3 stories taller than the heritage building and include step backs of at least 3 meters. Zone 3 is intended to provide a visual backdrop to the campus and provide a transition zone between new and old. Construction in this area may be taller than the existing heritage buildings, but should avoid interrupting the important axial views of the campus. And then finally, Zone D is the area of new construction, so the area in purple. The goal of this area is to utilize the vacant and underutilized land on the edges of the campus to incorporate new development and additional density on the site in a compatible way. Any existing buildings in Zone D are permitted for demolition as they do not have cultural heritage value. New construction should be designed to be compatible, subordinate, distinguishable from the existing buildings while employing high quality materials, sensitive form and massing. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, Ottawa as the national capital is home to many large campuses owned by the federal government, as we've all seen in the news over the past few months in particular. In the post-pandemic city, many of these properties are being disposed of, and the city will need to consider their heritage value as part of the planning and development process. The designation and development review process for this property has taken a somewhat novel approach, which we think can be applied to other properties in the future to ensure that the city's intensification goals are met while conserving important heritage resources, which are both goals of the city's official plan. So in that, I will conclude and say we recommend the notice of intention to designate both of these properties, as well as the adoption of the conservation design guidelines for the use and evaluation of applications at 1495 Heron Road. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for the 12 years of work on the item. It's much appreciated. We do have a correspondence. We did receive correspondence from Guildwood Residents Alliance as well as Heritage Ottawa, and we do have a number of registered speakers, primarily the project team, who I'm sure are here more to ask or answer questions than to give a formal presentation. Oh, excellent, excellent. Sure. So yeah, please. Excellent. Thank you, sir, for joining us, and you have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair and committee members. So my name is Taylor Marquis. I am the Director of Real Estate at Canada Lands Company, the current property owner for 1495 Heron Road. I'm joined today by Mary Jarvis, the Senior Director of Real Estate at Canada Lands, and our project team, Eric Bay, Bay's planner at Stantec, and Clara Shipman, Project Manager at ERA Architects. So I don't have a presentation, but we just kind of wanted to introduce Canada Lands, kind of our involvement, and then if you have any questions for our project team. So for a short introduction, Canada Lands is a self-financing federal crown corporation and the real estate development arm of the Government of Canada, specializing in real estate and development. For almost 30 years, our mission has been to ensure the innovative and commercially sound redevelopment and reintegration of surplus Government of Canada properties into local communities while developing, retaining, and managing certain real estate assets and uniquely Canadian attractions. So several of our real estate projects in Ottawa include Wateridge Village, near the Rockcliffe Airport, former DND base, the Booth Street Complex, and 299 Carling near Preston Street. And we're currently working with Public Services and Procurement Canada on the future of Confederation Heights and Penny's Pasture. So we're working hard with all levels of government to unlock these underused federal lands for housing and to meet our 5-year target of 29,000 new homes with a minimum of 20% of that. So with that, we're excited to bring this file in front of you today as it presents one step closer to preparing the property market and development to enable over 1,000 units of housing and affordable housing on the property. Our current plans are to bring this property to market early next year following zoning approvals and the completion of work and all the one of the things we staff for I realized it was 12.
While also in a key location in Ottawa, providing for greater density. So I think we're all excited about that. What shape are the heritage or soon to be heritage buildings in?
So we think they're in pretty good shape. We're doing kind of all the interior kind of abatement work so that when the land is sold, that they're ready for a future developer to kind of get in there. With the approach that we've taken, the buildings are intended to be retained. So we do believe that they're in a usable shape to be repurposed.
Okay. Some of the spaces with this designation are unlikely to be usable for commercial or residential. They're really kind of public realm spaces at the end of this. What is the thinking around the disposal strategy of those spaces? Are you going to parcel them out such that they will have to be part and parcel of a private development? Or do you anticipate that there might be federal ownership of some of the parcels moving forward?
So honestly, to be determined. Our intention right now is to put the entire property up for availability at the same time, and then we'll kind of see what kind of responses we get back from the public. And it'll be an open, kind of fair, transparent, open to everybody. So we'll see what we get across our table, and maybe we might need to shift the approach based on what's in front of us. We've been working really hard with Siobhan to ensure that there's not just commercial and residential uses, but also theaters, more cultural aspects, community aspects as well, to ensure that that's like.
For the Zoom participants, please note we are having technical difficulties and we are working on it.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Just wanted to see if Member Quinn can hear us.
Sorry, yes, I can now hear you.
Can hear? Okay, perfect. So we will then resume. Okay, so the only other registered speaker was Heritage Ottawa, and we'll invite them up for a comment.
You should just have a permanent chair at that table.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heritage Ottawa has been involved in this as long as Ms. Collins. In fact, I remember well Stuart Lazier telling me, we've just hired this young planner from Newfoundland, and I think I'm going to put her on Campanale. We went, yes. Heritage Ottawa has long advocated for this property to be considered for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act, and has been actively involved in the public consultations regarding the site. It is an excellent example of the modernist style of architecture designed by an Ottawa architect for institutional use. It also offers excellent potential for adaptive reuse and intensification. The Canada Lands Company, in conjunction with the property owners, has undertaken extensive public consultation on options for its use and has worked with the city and heritage consultants in providing for its protection and a potential adaptive reuse for the property that incorporate most of the buildings on the site. The designation proposed in the staff report, which states that the property meets 7 of the 9 criteria under Ontario Regulation 0906, is an important step in the survival and further development of this property. We support the recommendation to issue a notice of intention to designate and commend the city, and also recommending the conservation guidelines to be used in evaluating future applications under the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for David? Seeing none, thank you so much. Now, questions to staff. Councillor Carr.
I just have one question. There's no heritage protection for the tunnels, correct?
Sorry, no heritage protection for?
The underground tunnels.
No, nothing for the underground tunnels. We talked about it though.
Thanks. And before we wrap up, I will have comments. Do you want me to make them now?
Yes, you can make comments.
Okay, yeah. I'll just say, I mean, certainly I haven't been working on this file for a dozen years, but I feel like I've been connected to it for longer than that. Strangely, I used to work for Canada Border Services. We used to be able to rent that space because it was part of the public safety portfolio for office space. It has been vacant for about since 2012. One of my very dear friends was able to get into the building and write an article in it that appeared in the 2017 Ottawa Life magazine. She has some amazing photographs of what the inside of that building will be. It's just steps away from both her house and my house. I walk through that property every day when I go to the ward office and know it quite well. And I was able to be on the Public Advisory Committee for Canada Lands before I was elected, when I was still a community volunteer. And I'm really pleased to see that we're keeping that designation. I spoke about my girlfriend who wrote the article. She got to meet the architect Tim Murray and managed to bring him to a community meeting. I don't know, Mary, were you at that meeting when we were able to get him out? And were you there, Leslie, as well at that meeting? Yeah, so we were actually able to get the architect out. His son brought it out, and he was 33 when he designed that place in 1963. So he was able to come to a Zoom meeting during the time of the pandemic of isolation and hear about the fact that we were going to be able to retain his work. So I do have a bit of attachment to that, but overall, I'm really looking forward to seeing this progress. I've heard from the community about the importance of the bell tower in particular, and of the auditorium and the chapel being conserved, and looking forward to seeing this progress and seeing that getting a tenant into that building that has respect for the original campus. So just a big thank you to staff and Canada Lands. This has been and Heritage Ottawa and everyone that's been involved. Looking forward to seeing the designation and seeing this progress. And thank you to the chair of this committee, who does a fantastic job at chairing.
Thank you so much, Councillor Carr. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. Leslie, I'm wondering if you could just clarify, we just had this conversation privately at the break, but just to clarify, so if this was still owned by PSPC, our designation would not apply, but now it's owned by Canada Lands, so it does apply? Is this?
So properties that are owned by the federal government, the city can designate them under the Ontario Heritage Act, but the federal government, as a higher level of government, does not have to follow the heritage permit process, et cetera, et cetera. So our practice has typically been that a property that is not designated under the Heritage Act, such as this one, but is designated by FBRO, so the Federal Heritage Buildings Review Office, which actually is different now. I think it's called Federal Heritage Review Office, FBRO. When those properties leave the federal inventory and go to Canada Lands or a private owner, the city then brings forward a recommendation to designate as appropriate under the Heritage Act.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, thank you for all your work for 12 years and everyone who advocated. I really enjoyed this presentation. This committee feels like a cool history class sometime, and it was really interesting to learn more about this campus. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Quinn.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you to you too, Leslie Collins, for 12 years of dedicated hard work. I also have a slightly familial association with the campus. My sister was a student at this school. She was older than I am, and I have some vague recollections of attending performances and things when I was younger, and not understanding why at the time, but recognizing on some level that the whole space and the spatial experience of the campus and the buildings was unique. And I will also say that I have had several aunties who also graduated from the original convent on Gloucester Street. So deep history with that order of nuns. I'm sorry if I'm asking a question that was already asked because of the fact that we have been having some technical difficulties, but I was just wondering if Canada Lands had been asked about the local community association's desire to have some consideration for retirement residents on the site. I'm sorry if this is a repeat. I was just wondering about that. Was that addressed?
That question wasn't posed. I don't know if staff could speak to that.
Unfortunately, I cannot speak to the question. Sorry.
We still do have members from CLC, so I know this is not a regular practice, but because of the technical difficulties, we're inviting them back to
Thank
answer
you.
Member Quinn's question.
Yeah, because she started cutting out and I could no longer hear what was going on. So thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. So in terms of the zoning uses we're seeking on site, our retirement residence and kind of that use will be hopefully permitted. And then when it comes to the actual disposal of the property, we go through a bit of a standard kind of open market process, which is kind of open to the wider market. And then we receive the proposals, and then we'll do a review at that time to kind of find the best candidate for the parcel. So.
Okay, thank you. That I wanted you to have the chance to be on record of saying that, I think, for the community association's benefit as well as mine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions on this file? Seeing none, I just would also briefly want to echo what members have been saying, and we're very thankful for Leslie's time and perseverance and effort on this file. And I think we're also excited about the potential for designation because of its capacity for preservation and adaptive reuse, but as well as the potential for development generally of affordable housing, housing for retirement, the prospect of 1,000 new homes being accommodated on this site is also an exciting one for the city, and it demonstrates balance between the capacity for preservation and the potential for development. So I think that's very important. Is the report carried? Carried. Thank you so much. So this report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on October 30th for its consideration. The last substantive item on our agenda is the adoption of new Heritage Conservation District plans for the Byward and Lower Town West HCDs. And we will have a presentation from staff. And we'll start momentarily.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of committee. We are excited to be bringing forward this report this morning, recommending the adoption of the proposed new Heritage Conservation District plans for the Byward Market and Lower Town West Heritage Conservation Districts. What I would like to do this morning is just give a quick sort of background on the project. It has been underway for the last couple of years, and then do a bit of an overview of the plans without getting too much in the details. But I'd also like to just introduce our consultant on the plan, Sally Coots of Sally Coots Heritage Consulting. She prepared the plans on behalf of the branch, and she's here this morning with us as well. So if we go to the next slide, just that bit of background. So the Heritage Planning Branch initiated this project to update the Lower Town West and Byward Market heritage conservation districts in 2021. Both heritage conservation districts were originally studied and ultimately designated in the early 1990s under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So they have been designated for about 30 years, and together they are two of the oldest HCDs in the city and in the province. At the time, City Council adopted a set of guidelines for each HCD, outlining how changes and alterations within the district should be undertaken, including technical guidance, conservation guidance for many of the historic buildings. Under the Ontario Heritage Act at the time, those types of guidelines were not a requirement for heritage conservation districts. However, that changed in 2005, and the Ontario Heritage Act was amended, making HCD plans a requirement for new conservation districts, and also allowing municipalities to go back and adopt plans for those existing HCDs like Byward Market and Lower Town West. And also outlining the components that must be included in those plans. So the city has been prioritizing the replacement of older guideline documents with new plans for existing HCDs across the city. And so these new plans for the Byward Market and Lower Town West meet the requirements under the OHA and will achieve the goal of updating 2 of the 5 remaining pre-2005 HCDs. If we go to the next slide, that was really the main goal of this project, to update and replace those existing guidelines with a new plan that meets the OHA requirements. In 2021, the city hired our consultant, Sally Coots of Sally Coots Heritage Consulting, to undertake that work. And since then, we've been working together in consultation with a working group for each HCD, made up of various stakeholders and representatives from the Lower Town Community Association, who all provided really great feedback throughout this process. As well, the project included a review of the original inventory data and evaluation that was completed at the time of designation for all the properties in each HCD. If we go to the next slide, as part of this update, all of that information and evaluation was reviewed for accuracy and also to ensure that each property's contribution to their respective HCD remained. All of the data from that original inventory has now been compiled in a digital database along with new photos. Next slide. As has been the city's recent practice and best practice across the province, in terms of categorization for properties, both Byward and Lower Town, for these new plans, we've moved away from a multi-category approach to categorization towards just a binary approach, basically to recognize simply whether a property contributes to the cultural heritage value of the HCD or not. And so that helps to provide a clearer, more transparent understanding of what the expectation is for how change should occur on those properties. So for the most part, properties' contribution remain the same with a handful of exceptions. There's also no changes to the boundaries as part of this project. On the next slide, just a really quick slide here. These are those required components that the changes to the OHA in 2005 they made the requirements for plans. They really dictate the structure of any Heritage Conservation District plan, and both of the plans before you this morning include all of these components. Next slide, just quickly. So the statement of objectives, every plan provides a statement of objectives. These are really the overarching goals to be achieved through designation. Each of the 2 plans provides about 20 objectives. They're organized by theme. I've just included a couple of them here, but generally they speak to encouraging awareness of each HCD, recognizing and celebrating their different histories and stories. They also speak to the conservation of historic buildings and their historic fabric, while also recognizing that change is going to occur and ensuring that change and new elements can be completed sensitively and compatibly. If we go to the next slide, the statements of value, these are those reasons for each HCD, reasons that they're significant. At the time of the designation of both districts, heritage character statements were prepared. However, they were very focused on each area's sort of primary role. So for the Byward Market, it was quite focused on its early commercial, its role as the early commercial center, and for Lower Town as the primarily residential neighborhood. Through this project, we heard from the community that there were also some broader values that were important as well. So for example, in both districts, we've heard that they have an important role as a gathering place for many different communities, newcomers to Canada, who many of whom established longstanding businesses in the market and in Lower Town. Also, the important relationship to the surrounding waterways, as well as associations with important themes and key events and organizations who've had important roles in shaping both HCDs and how they developed. So the revised statement of value, each statement of value includes more of these themes and stories that weren't captured before or didn't come through as strongly. If we go to the next slide, as required, both plans include a list of attributes, mainly the physical elements that express the values in the statement. So both documents include a list of those. They're organized by theme as well to correspond with that statement of value. For the Byward Market, these include the Byward Market building as a focal point at the core of the HCD and its continued function as a community gathering space and a hub for commercial and social and cultural activities, as well as its relationship to surrounding shops on William and Byward Market Square, its early 19th century buildings and their architectural details, the commercial and mixed use buildings and its on its traditional main streets, many of which have been modified to suit the needs of different generations over time. For Lower Town, this includes its rich and layered variety of residential building types, styles, materials on the east and west streets, those commercial and mixed use buildings as well as the primacy of the spires of Notre Dame Basilica and the former St. Bridget's Church within the skyline that reflects the area's sense of place. So together with the objectives and the statement, these are really the foundational pieces that we'd be looking for in terms of impact when we receive heritage permit applications. Next slide, please. So the policies and guidelines, this is the biggest part of the plan, of both plans, and they provide direction and guidance for how to ensure the conservation of either HCD. So both plans are organized into sections by the sort of most common types of alterations that we typically see. So conservation and repair of existing buildings, alterations and additions, landscaping, streetscape, public realm, as well as demolition and new construction. And the plans provide both policy and guidelines. So the policy would be the required direction, and the guidelines would provide more technical conservation guidance, much of which was carried forward from the existing guideline documents. And also to recognize that there could be a range of methods or ways of achieving the related policy. If we go to the next slide, since all of the properties in the boundaries of the HCD are considered to be designated, just like our other HCDs, the plans also provide direction to distinguish between which of those have elements that express the cultural heritage value and those that do not. And the way we do that is by having those properties as contributing or non-contributing to the HCDs. In general, the contributing properties are the ones we'd want to see retained and conserved. We don't want to see them demolished. We'd want to see them, potentially restored through conservation and repair of historic fabric, ensuring that alterations are compatible and sympathetic to the existing building, but also with the HCD as a whole. The non-contributing properties, those include many of the contemporary buildings or vacant lots. So both plans encourage restoration of elements that may have been removed and ensuring that alterations complement the HCD. If we were to receive a demolition permit, the plans would contemplate a replacement building for these properties in this category if the design was sensitive and compatible with the HCD. If we go to the next slide, just quickly, the plans also provide direction for a number of public realm related components from a heritage perspective, and these are intended to work alongside the city's other approved plans and bylaws and guidelines like the signs bylaw or patio bylaw and other urban design related guidelines. So in particular, I wanted to just flag this. We heard a lot from the community and different stakeholders about the potential for impacts from patios. So both plans include a section with direction to make sure they are designed and located sensitively. They use compatible materials while also meeting the needs of businesses and accessibility requirements in both districts. If we go to the next slide, an important component, I would say, of preparing any HCD plan is to ensure that the policies work alongside with other planning policies, bylaws, and city guidelines. As on the slide, we've got some maps. As you can see, we have a complex framework to consider in this area. On the left, the map shows the layers of the Byward Market Public Realm Plan, as well as the special districts identified through the city's official plan. Which apply to properties in both HCDs, as well as the downtown corridor policies in the city's official plan as well, in addition to the zoning bylaw and a variety of other municipal documents. So as part of this update, the HCD plans have been written to support those documents by providing context specifically from a heritage perspective, where that's appropriate, and the plans have been reviewed by a range of internal departments for consistency. If we go to the next slide, in terms of alignment with planning policy, one thing we have also been trying to do with our new district plans is provide for how housing and density in the core, as directed by the province and the city's official plan, can be achieved while also conserving heritage resources. The Heritage Planning Branch doesn't see these as mutually exclusive goals. Projects and development can and need to do both. It's just a question of how and finding that right balance. So in both district plans, we see that balance being achieved through additions to existing buildings or incorporating an existing building into a larger project, development of existing vacant lots, and designing new buildings compatibly and sensitively. So both plans include sections to reflect those scenarios. Given that there is such a range of stylistic influences in both districts, the policies don't require a building to be a certain style or have a historic look, but that the plans do facilitate that approach if an applicant wished to pursue that. Instead, the policies focus on finding ways to ensure compatibility in a streetscape through consistent setbacks, materials referencing patterns of traditional elements like storefront arrangements, porches, or windows, and taking cues from surrounding contributing properties. The policies also focus on conserving the HCD's sense of place by allowing contributing properties to be the focal point. So the policies speak to incorporating transition elements, using design measures like step back and changes in materials, particularly if a contributing building is integrated into a new project. If we go to the next slide, in addition to those new construction policies and the sections mentioned, we've also given critical thought to where intensification projects might be located within the HCD. Each HCD where impacts on their cultural heritage value might be relatively low or could be mitigated. So for the Byward Market, the plan speaks to maintaining the general low-rise character and accordingly recommends new height be located away from the market building and the core of the market, with some potential for height on Dalhousie Street, provided that any impacts can be mitigated appropriately. If we go to the next slide, in Lower Town West, the plan speaks a bit more broadly about height, focusing on taking cues from existing contributing buildings around a project, but also contemplates locations where impacts on the overall value could be mitigated as well, generally being on Dalhousie Street or King Edward Avenue. For both plans, both districts, their plans focus on ensuring the primacy of the spires of Notre Dame Basilica and the former St. Bridget's Church in the skyline, and that can be conserved. Additionally, the plan for Lower Town West also recognizes that there's a concentration of many historic places of worship and other types of institutional properties, and that they play an important role in the district. It also recognizes that some of those properties have some challenges, facing that they're facing in terms of remaining accessible to all users and finding appropriate new uses, and how that can impact their ability to conserve their buildings. So the plan for Lower Town West has been drafted to provide a framework for considering applications that may include a range of conservation approaches related to those types of sites. That could be away from those main streets I mentioned if an application were to be received. That could facilitate some of the city's broader goals, and provided that an applicant could demonstrate that impacts on the HCD can be mitigated. Just quickly to wrap up here, if we go to the next slide in terms of consultation, although the Heritage Act only requires one statutory meeting, this project has really benefited from a number of public sessions, both in person and online. We've established 2 working groups. We had an online survey, as well as meetings with owners and the community association through this project. The chair mentioned at the beginning of the meeting today, for the purposes of the act, today's meeting will satisfy that required public meeting, and owners within the boundaries were notified in advance per the OHA requirements. And if we go to the last slide, just in conclusion, so staff are recommending approval and adoption of the proposed HCD plans for the Byron Market and for Lower Town West HCDs by bylaw, as they comply with the requirements under the OHA. The HCD plans will provide a stronger framework for the protection of the HCD's cultural heritage values and resources into the future, and in a manner that aligns with the planning framework. Staff are also recommending approval of a few technical and administrative recommendations that aren't on the screen there, but they're related to bringing forward the bylaws to council if they're approved, as well as bylaw registration and accuracy of title details. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa, and the only registered speaker on this item is Heritage Ottawa.
This has really been a good news meeting. Not used to this. These 2 plans include enhanced protection for over 700 properties in the oldest section of the city, an area that has been ripe for new development, often at the expense of its built heritage. The scope of these plans attempts to align them with the city's official plan and zoning and other bylaws to afford enhanced protection and integration of heritage resources in future development. These plans are a result of extensive consultation with the community and the work of heritage planning staff in addressing community concerns with the current guidelines and the challenges in protecting the heritage resources of the districts. They attempt to define and protect important heritage elements in the face of rezoning proposals, the intent of the official plan, intensification, and even plans to enhance Ottawa's nightlife. Heritage advocates will now have plans for these 2 HCDs that will complement or provide a counterbalance to these other initiatives. Of special interest is sections 5.0.1 of both plans, which note that, quote, demolition by neglect is not considered a valid reason for demolition, unquote. It remains to be seen whether this wording will in fact enhance the monitoring and protection of our built heritage. I think it will. Heritage Ottawa is therefore pleased to support the adoption of these 2 plans and congratulates city staff and community representatives for all their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. I don't see any raised hands, but your comments are appreciated. Questions to staff? Are there any questions on this item? Seeing none, just wanted to briefly say to staff that we're very appreciative that you've devised plans that are compatible and sensitive to the characteristics of all of these neighborhoods, while at the same time developing them through extensive consultation. We know it's a tremendous amount of work, and we are appreciative of that work. Is the report carried? Carried. Thank you so much. This report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on October 16th for consideration. Are there any in-camera items? Seeing none. In terms of information previously distributed, designation refusals for fall 2024 have been circulated. Notices of motion. I don't see any. Inquiries. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate the ability to put an inquiry on the table, and thanks to staff.
And Councillor, if you can speak closer.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate the ability to put an inquiry forward, and for staff's help in getting some answers on this issue. The inquiry is on July 9th, 2024. An application to alter 259 Clement Avenue came before the Built Heritage Committee. The property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Clement-Monkland Driveway and Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District. Unfortunately, notifications of this application were not delivered to nearby residents until days before the committee meeting, resulting in only one resident able to attend the meeting. Though the application and designated property were of concern to many of the surrounding neighbors, further, the radius within which notices are delivered is relatively small as compared to the Heritage Conservation District, and did not reach all residents who would have wished to provide input on the application. The file also had only one day between being voted on at committee, July 9th, and then the vote at City Council, July 10th. As such, we're interested in exploring how notification could be improved and or expanded, recognizing staff's good work on this and their responsiveness in this committee in general. So to staff, what are the current notification requirements when there is an application to alter or demolish a heritage designated property, and what occurred with regard to 259 Clement? What would prompt a heritage file to be considered by committee and then council within a 24-hour period? And what is the feasibility of expanding our notification procedures for such applications, including but not limited to increasing the radius for the delivery of notifications to nearby residences, especially when a street or area is within a heritage conservation district? Posting large public notifications on the affected properties that can easily be noticeable from the street. This could include signs posted at the property line or a larger sign on the property, and notifying local community associations or residents associations. Are there any other methods available to the city to improve notification? So I put this forward also with thanks to staff, because I know that they are responsive on these matters, and I'm hopeful that we can maybe make it just a couple of small adjustments in the future for these types of issues. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Menard. Is there any other business? Seeing none, on adjournment. We're adjourned. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. Thank you, everybody, for your perseverance today.